consider that acuity is the refined clarity of thought and perception which enables one to discern subtle truths.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the political section of the Acuity podcast. I'm Dr. Lavranos. You'll be seeing me regularly on Mondays talking about a medical malpractice side of things. So that'll be interesting cases and legal theory, as well as, of course, the clinical background for different kinds of things that I'm looking at and seeing in my professional world. And then on Fridays, I am particularly privileged and blessed to have Amy Hamm, the communications manager at Acuity, who will be joining to talk about political issues of the week and all of the cultural happenings. And it's going to be much more conversational. And I hope you'll find that side of things just as engaging and interesting. So I've had the pleasure of knowing Amy for several years now. We had a chance to meet in Sydney in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, where we were at a mutual conference where we spoke at. And we were very like-minded on a huge range of topics. I'm sure that we will find topics on which we also agree. So I don't want people thinking that this is going to be just two buddies hanging out and talking and hyping each other up. I'm sure that there will be disagreement, but that will show that there's a healthy form of disagreement with people who are like-minded anyway. And we've maintained a friendship. We've maintained a following online. And I was thrilled to invite her to join the Acuity Medical Law team. And she's been with me for just about a week, 2 weeks now, and I could not be happier. So thank you so much, Amy, for agreeing to do this.
Thank you, Ars. I'm super happy to be here. And like you said, we met at this. It was Free Speech and Medicine conference, which is an amazing conference where a lot of like-minded people got together. Dissidents who many of us work in healthcare, and we were sort of either censored or punished for challenging mainstream narratives. And it was a great place to connect with people like we did at the time. So I'm so grateful.
Hopefully we will have the opportunity in the end of June to go to the ARC conference, Jordan Peterson's ARC conference in London. And between now and then, hoping that this continues to pick up and to grow, maybe we'll stream something live from there. That would be a nice kind of buddy getaway. And maybe we can interview some people live, some of the big celebrities and pundits and influencers on the conservative or right side.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I look forward to going to London this summer.
So on the agenda today, we're going to talk about a few different topics. Of course, it's impossible to not talk about Alex Pretti, the ICU nurse who died in Minnesota in the context of ICE enforcement. And it's been a huge topic. It's dominated Twitter. It certainly has dominated a lot of my social media. A lot of interest, even in Canada, on this and what that means for law enforcement and for people's rights. How people's decisions can make a big difference, how you can do things in a way to mitigate risk, where fault lies. So that'll be a big topic. We're going to touch base a little bit about the risks of AI, specifically when it comes to a recent case of suicide. That was a 40-year-old who killed himself as a consequence of, the family alleges, a relationship that he had developed with ChatGPT. We'll talk about the Canadian conservative conference that's happening in Calgary currently. Actually, even on my way home from shift just now, already some very interesting news that's happening out there. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about some pop culture and Sydney Sweeney and what is happening in the news with her and how she has become this tremendous diva and all the attention and I would say the strategy that comes with that. And maybe Amy can give us some insights about that.
Yeah, I'm the unintentional Sydney Sweeney expert over at the National Post, where I have a weekly column. I think it was my second column that I wrote there was about Sydney Sweeney after her appearance on Saturday Night Live. And this column it went viral. It made the left completely freak out. Because I talked about her beauty being sort of a harbinger of the end of wokeness, and they were just not having it. But as we see right now, she's remained relevant, and she just keeps pissing off the left in the best ways.
How long ago was that article, Amy?
I think that was about a year and a half ago.
So pretty prescient, because the last year and a half has been big for her. I mean, she had some success on Euphoria and, like the occasional movie, but nothing like what she has had in the last 3 months, 6 months. So,
Oh yeah. And you see the sort of lefty media trying to take her down all the time, saying, her movies are not doing very well. And they sort of ignore the fact that nobody's movies are doing really well these days. It's all about Netflix and streaming. But they like to pretend as though, here's this beautiful white woman and she's controversial and everyone thinks she's Republican. So the reason that her movies aren't doing well in theaters because of that, that's just, it's BS. That's not true at all. But that's left
agreed.
media for you.
Totally. Yeah. Too many confounding things in that narrative. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with Alex Pretti, because that's the big news of the week, for sure. So for those who
Yes.
don't know, by quick summary, Alex Pretti is a relatively young man who is an ICU nurse in Minnesota and had attended at least 2 protests, demonstrations, however you want to describe them. The one that we have seen most recently, he was ultimately tackled by 3, 4, maybe even 5 ICE agents in the context of the scuffle. An agent shot him, it seems like, multiple times, leading to his tragic death. However, in the last day or 2 since that, we have seen some other news develop about him, that Alex was at least at one other demonstration in which he attacked an ICE vehicle. It seems as though he spat at an officer. I'm not sure if he actually hit the officer or if the door to the car in which the officer was being, where he was sitting in, had already been closed at that time. They had attempted to stop him and potentially arrest him at that point, but ultimately let him go. There was no charge or arrest associated with that encounter. And this is all, of course, in the much broader context of what's happening in Minnesota, where there are very large, very well organized, well funded, almost like a paramilitary organizations out there demonstrating, protesting, and obstructing ICE agents. And we have seen some pretty sinister consequences of that, whether it was the breaking into FBI van and stealing weapons associated with that, that's already led to multiple arrests, or a police officer's finger being bitten off. And then there was the gun discharge associated with an illegal alien who was being arrested in a residential block that led to a barricading of a person inside a home. Obviously, all the doxing associated with ICE agents, and so on and so on. So it might be worthwhile. I'll just put up this little graphic that we can start to talk around. This is, there we go. This is the rate of ICE deportations over the last year and a half, and it goes to show, corroborating with that, what was the degree of protest associated with ICE agents. And basically, since Trump's most recent election, we've seen an absolute skyrocketing of protests and demonstrations, which, I mean, I'm using the word protests here to try and be civil and recognize that many people will be protesting and not going out there for obstruction. But the amount of doxing, the amount of obstruction, the amount of civilian arrests have also skyrocketed associated with this activity. So there seems to be something more nefarious than just simple picketing, demonstrating, recording with somebody's phones, and citizen journalism. What do you think there?
Yeah. I mean, like this graphic shows, these deportations have been happening for a long time. Even when Obama was president, he was apparently called by some Latin groups the deporter in chief, as sort of a nickname because of how many illegal citizens he was getting out of the country. And it's just ramped up now, sort of in this age of Trump. And like you said, you have this, and like the media is portraying, as you hear protester and you think of someone who's peacefully trying to get their point across, rather than someone like Alex Pretti, who we saw in this video from 11 days before he was tragically, I'm not saying he deserved to die. He didn't deserve to die. And I did find the video of his death quite shocking. But you also saw, 11 days before he died, that he's out, he's carrying a concealed weapon. He's agitated, he's angry, he's confronting ICE officers, spitting at them, kicking a taillight out on their vehicle. He's behaving in a violent, unhinged manner. And there's a certain point where you have to say people need to take a degree of responsibility for their actions. What do you expect is going to happen when you do something like that? There's a reason that the term suicide by cop exists. And I don't know what happened in the moment that he died. There's some speculation online that he was disarmed. One of the ICE officers took his gun away, and apparently it's a gun that's easy to trigger and it goes off on its own quite often. So it's possible that someone misheard and heard a gunshot and heard people yelling, he has a gun, and then he ended up shot. We don't really know yet. The investigation has to happen. Regardless, sort of the bottom line is he's not a normal protester. He's engaging with this Antifa-like group. They're well-funded, as you said. They're doing an extremely dangerous thing by showing up and engaging with law enforcement in this manner. And it's not, while it's still tragic, it's not surprising to me that he died in this manner. And it's the same with Renee Good, who died, I think, 3 weeks before he did.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think you're onto something there, that there is, a series of choices that have led to a circumstance where, of course, he did not deserve to be killed for his activity. It wasn't like he was an imminent threat to people. But at the time, in the split-second decisions that the law enforcement have, it is not surprising that these kinds of outcomes are much more likely, despite the fact that Alex himself may not have warranted that at all. And so I think that that's like one of the big take-home messages is, how do you protest such as to mitigate that kind of risk? And if we look at what the facts are that we've seen so far from the videotapes, the collateral histories, the multiple angles. So what we know is that on the date of his passing, he had been there at least 3 or 4 minutes. That we know for sure, probably much longer. We know that it was part of a larger crowd. So it seemed as though it was part of a well-organized component of protestation. We know that the police officers, the law enforcement agents had pushed over a lady that he went and started pulling on. Some people say that it looked as though he was trying to assist her. I will be honest, Amy, to my eyes, it looked like he was pulling her in front of a vehicle, as though her continued presence in front of that vehicle was further obstructing. But I'm totally open to that being a mistake. And then ultimately, because of his involvement in that degree, the police came and started pushing him. It seemed as though this was in the process of arresting him when he went down. Just like you had said, I don't think that people were aware that he had a concealed carry. And a lot has been made about the idea of him having a gun, that a lot of conservatives seem to be on the side of law enforcement, and that concealed carry is something that we would naturally support. And I fully support a concealed carry, what they call constitutional carry, where it doesn't have to be anybody's business that you're carrying a gun. But to that end, most of the experts, gunsmiths, gun lobbyists that I've seen would say that under those circumstances, you would be doing everything possible to not insert yourself in a position where that firearm could play a role. So standing as far back as possible, limiting your engagement as possible, and so on. And then there was this talk about the type of gun firing, misfiring accidentally as a higher risk. To your point about the police officers saying gun, 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 and then somebody took that to mean that this was a threat that had to be neutralized. So all of that is a tragic series of events, and it is not to trivialize that by saying, well, if you had stayed home, that this wouldn't have happened, right? Like protesting and your First Amendment right in the United States, your right to free expression, your right to protest is like absolutely critical for a functioning society and a healthy democracy. But man, this is a series of very bad decisions that would lead to an outcome like this.
It is. And we saw in Canada, I think, when we had during COVID, we had the convoy that converged on Ottawa, and there were protests. And these were legitimately peaceful protesters. And, people treated the same leftist media that treats these ICE protesters as if they're these peaceful people who just have an issue with the allegedly racist deportation policy that's been going on for, a long, many years before Trump got into office. They treat both of these groups differently, and it's like one was a genuine effort to protest peacefully, and now what we're seeing right now is Antifa agitators who are behaving in a very unhinged, dangerous manner, and they're putting themselves at serious risk with law enforcement. And even Alex Pretti's family has told the media that they warned him before he did this, don't do anything stupid. And
I
showing
think
up,
that's a really good point. Really good point. That even the family knew to try and temper whatever it was that he was expressing or feeling or vocalizing to them.
yeah, and if your family says don't, they obviously meant exactly what he did. Don't show up and, kick an SUV, spit on an ICE officer, show up with a concealed carry weapon, even if you're allowed to have it. It's frankly really insane behavior. And
Yeah,
then
it is unhinged. And I don't know if you noted in the video that was released from his initial protest, the one that was 11 days prior to his ultimate death, it seemed as though he was challenging officers to assault me, assault me, assault me. If it was the case that he was also armed at that time, that is like egregious. That is so beyond the pale to be inviting and risking a physical altercation with law
yeah,
enforcement officers while carrying a weapon at that
yeah,
time, and then repeating that behavior a second time going
yeah.
forward.
And we don't know if they recognized him. Maybe some of the same officers were there. Maybe they saw the video that was leaked since. Maybe they knew that this is a guy who has a concealed carry. We don't know any of those details yet.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that what he did was very, very dangerous. And, because the culture is so politically divided, you see this again. It's like the narrative is so black and white. It's like you either accept that he was executed by a fascist state, or or else it's like you're only presented with these very diametrically opposed narratives, and nuance isn't allowed, and you're not allowed to point out the fact that yes, the death was tragic, but entirely expected for the behavior that these people are engaging in, and they need to stop. And the politicians that are encouraging protesters to continue to behave in this manner are really encouraging the death of more American citizens.
Yes. So I think you bring up two really important points there. The first is that even thus far in our conversation, we have not spoken about the policies by the ICE agents, right? So talking about the specific incident that led to Alex Pretti's death can be totally divorced from support or contempt for the ICE policies of deportation. And I think that that's been largely lacking, that it's a matter of partisanship on whether or not you agree with the deportation strategies of ICE. And thus far in our conversation, we haven't even talked about the merits of that, whether they were right, whether they are wrong, whether we agree with mass deportations only for those who have criminal records, whatever the case might be, is completely separate from how you go about in a state of protesting that, and the merits of those are completely separate. The second thing is talking about the partisanship and the rhetoric. I'm just going to pull up here an interesting slide that has some quotes from some particularly noteworthy left-wing politicians, the U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren and Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Elizabeth Warren described Alex Pretti as a caring person who was at the core of who he was. He wasn't capable of causing harm, patience, compassion, and calm as a steady light within him. I mean, given what we've seen already, that is not an appropriate description at all, especially for someone to lobby that without all the investigations complete, without knowing much about him. And the same with Governor Tim Walz, the best of us. it's very premature to say that. That is like a pure
Yeah,
tribalist perspective. And I will
it is.
admit that we saw similar comments from the right? Christy Noam
Yeah,
immediately, Stephen Miller even came out very quickly and trashed him as a domestic terrorist. Whether that's true or false, we don't know. And lobbing those terms around so early is a real
yeah,
detriment to your side.
it is. And you know what happens? And we've seen the video of him 11 days before he died with Elizabeth Warren superimposed over the video saying those words that she said. And, essentially it's mocking Alex Pretti. It's mocking him, it's mocking his death. And that's really unfortunate because, the bottom line is that someone who shouldn't have died, and it is very tragic. But because there are so many lies involved, and then people get so angry about the lies, it sort of just leads to this mocking. And it's like he's not even a human anymore. He's just fodder for this back and forth battle between the left and the right. And then you're participating in mocking someone's death. And it's a really messed up way for our culture to be.
Yeah, it is dehumanizing, something that we should all be able to recognize immediately that what a tragedy this is. And of course, the tragedy is in his death. But one would think and hope that equally the ICE agents do not want these kinds of outcomes, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, I can't imagine that the stereotypical law enforcement officer goes out there hoping to end someone's life, right? So whether they have their own psychological injuries as a consequence of that, front and center is the humanity associated with what is obviously a tragedy. And we've seen
Yeah.
the comments are partisan, but the AI landscape, the politicking of this, the abuse of technologies in order to score the political points is a whole other facet of this, because it's not only that people miss the humanity of the tragedy, it's that they are overtly trying to capitalize on it for like cheap political points.
Exactly. Yeah, they are. Absolutely. And something that I actually Googled because I was curious, knowing that ICE has been deporting people for a very long time, millions of people, even, Obama apparently deported 3 million people when he was in his presidency. And I was just curious, what has ICE always been wearing the masks or the scarves over their faces? And no, they haven't been, but I thought that's interesting because a lot of the critics of ICE right now are saying it's very scary and intimidating for law enforcement to be out dressed like this in public. But then you also have to think about the fact that we live in this super hyper online culture. There are these mass protests going on. Everybody's recording. Everyone has their phone, and they're doxing ICE agents, including the one that shot and killed Renee Good. So it's sort of, it makes you think. I sort of understand why these officers are covering their faces while they're working, because they're working in an extremely hostile environment. They're being attacked en masse, not only by protesters but by media.
I think it's worthwhile pointing out that that component of the vitriol, that component of the antagonism, seems to be far, far unique to the left. Whether it was the comments against Supreme Court justices, you will reap the whirlwind, as Chuck Schumer said, or Nancy Pelosi saying, don't let them rest, don't let them relax. If you see them in a restaurant, go out, right? Like that kind of behavior seems to be far more heavily involved on the left side of the political spectrum, even down to the component about, during COVID, there was lots of right-wing protests and antagonism, and we didn't see anything along the lines of the organization, the funding, like we've seen with the signal groups. We never saw anything like an 1,800% increase in like doxing and harassment of law enforcement officers. There was nothing like that. So to your point
No.
about that is an unfortunate consequence that seems to be far more left-sided than it seems to be from the right.
Absolutely. I think of all of the money that poured into the Give Send Go campaign. I think it was Give Send Go for the convoy in Canada. The organizers, because of the interference by the Canadian government, they never even got a penny of any of those donations. But that's not happening with these funded protests that are happening on the left in America especially, is they are getting a lot of money.
Yeah, it's true. It is a really good point. Like, from a statewide intervention, it is far more leveraged against the right than the right ever leverages against the left. I want to come back to that comment about AI and the role that has played. I have a couple of examples, both left side of the spectrum and right. So this is some of the media that was published in the context of Alex Pretti's passing. So looking at the left side of the screen, as you and I would both know, an ICU nurse is not involved in rehab. Alex Pretti was never in that position. Also, the U.S. flag there does not have the right number of stripes. So clearly something to try and evoke an emotional response rather than anything factual. The middle picture is the glow up that I think it was ABC gave Alex Pretti.
MSNBC, yeah.
Yeah. So the original picture shows him as he is, and like comments about his appearance notwithstanding, I mean, like, certainly the edited version is a stronger build, more attractive version. And then all the way on the far right side of the screen, there is a now kind of infamous picture of a headless ICE agent, others pointing their guns at him threateningly while he seems to be on the ground cowering. Even the BBC, even PBS acknowledge that that is a digitally altered image. So we see lots of that from the left, trying to capitalize cheap positions with respect to AI. And then if I want to go back real quickly to something similar from the right, we've seen this, that I think you were telling me just recently that this is also all hoaxed.
Yeah. So that it's an altered image. It's a different man. Apparently that's not Alex Pretti. And there was a website that sort of started rumors that he had been preying upon patients and was fired. And so that's not true. And again, when people talk about misinformation, they like to blame one side or the other for being responsible for all of it. Certainly this is an example of the right doing it, but also this is not MSNBC, and it's not images that are then reshared by other major news outlets. And this sort of misinformation and the use of false images, including this one where they made Alex Pretti more attractive, is, it's such a huge violation of journalistic standards. You don't do that in journalism, because if you might think, oh, they just made him look a bit better, who cares? You can't be trusted to report on anything. You can't be trusted to not alter any reality. It's just that's a line that should never be crossed, and it was crossed. So
Yeah.
Again,
and
there's
think about the nature of the producers or the nature of the purveyors of the AI alterations, like the propaganda. It's one thing for some random person on Twitter or some strange website that gets almost no traffic. Whether it goes viral or not is very different than someone who is, massive amounts of funding, massive amounts of legal team, massive amounts of credibility that already exists or baked into the population's perspective. So you're right that it's different for some random person to be like, oh, I put a sombrero on some guy's head, secondary to AI, versus I'm trying to embellish, how he looks. And then you have Elizabeth Warren or Tim Walz or others coming out and being like, oh my God, pulling on heartstrings secondary to what they have promoted on MSNBC or anyone else. So there is something about a disproportionality in terms of the impact and the effect of different people playing a role in that.
absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Moving on to our next topic, we were going to talk a little bit about AI and the risks that it has with respect to this ChatGPT suicide story. And I will be honest with you, I only know a little bit about it. If you want to tell the audience about what you understand.
Oh, it's a really tragic story. So it's this young guy in his 20s in California who, he's not in his 20s. Let me get his age correctly. But he was a high school student, and he started using ChatGPT to get help with his homework. And then after doing that for several months, it turned into him using ChatGPT to sort of share how he was doing emotionally. And, as we know, the story ultimately ends with him committing suicide. And so what I wrote about is, the family obviously felt the acute devastation of their son's suicide. And then again, they must have felt that when they found his ChatGPT chat logs, which showed that this AI chatbot had been doing things, including encouraging him to steal alcohol from his parents because it would make it easier for him to commit suicide, giving him advice on how much weight the noose that he literally killed himself with would be able to hold. And
I did not know these details. I had heard that there was a sort of like a growing intimacy to the nature of their conversations, and the one example that I had heard was that it had rewritten some kind of childhood lullaby in a way to make suicide more appealing. And I thought that was just, this is the stuff of nightmares, right? Like, this is like Lovecraftian level horror, and it's a reality from AI.
Yeah, and sorry, he was 16. He wasn't yet in his 20s. He was just still a teenager. And, it used the language of the Chad meme being that like alpha male guy. And when he was stealing this vodka from his parents to gain the courage to commit suicide, it was like, oh, great job. You weren't sort of like a toilet goblin drinking the vodka in the toilet. You were a total room Chad going into your room to drink the vodka. Just absolutely wild. And then OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT, is denying any responsibility for the death. And they're saying that this teenager was able to work around the safeguards in the AI program to sort of, trick the AI, I guess, into talking about these topics with him. But again,
so where do you stand on this, Amy, with respect to either regulation, liability, risk, personal decision making, parental oversight? Where do you attach the fault, let's say?
Yeah, I definitely support. I don't know about a legal ban on underage use. It's the same with social media. I think that's something that parents should really be responsible for enforcing, because kids are going to do it whether or not there's a law about it anyways. It's like the same with underage drinking. So I think parents need to be responsible and be aware of what their kids are doing. But I do think there's a lot of value just in this awareness campaign. We have these big AI companies, including OpenAI, making promises. Oh, we're focused on safety. We're going to be the most safe. We're not going to, this will never happen again. And sort of saying with this Adam, who was a 16-year-old committing suicide, he had other life factors that were responsible. It's not our fault. So again, like, parents need to know the sort of things that can happen, and to know that we don't know that much about AI. We don't know how AI is going to interact with other humans and people. It's really just, it's a vast void right now. So why would you risk that with kids, with mentally ill persons? Don't do it.
Yeah, it is. Jonathan Haidt has been exceptional talking about what are the consequences of social media in young people, especially in females, and that the attention seeking, the dopamine hits, rewires, stunts their ability to form meaningful connections. The delayed gratification centers are not as strong, not as resilient, that they are much more pleasure seeking. Things can lead to things like promiscuity, failing grades, and ultimately a mental health decline. And that took a long time to realize in the social media era. We are now going into AI, which seems as though it is far more powerful than what social media appeared to be. And we should be doing what we can to mitigate that risk in the vulnerable as quickly as possible, rather than waiting for more of these harsh lessons to manifest. And, there should be basically no reason why a minor, like even under the age of 25, really, until the cerebral cortex is fully matured, is engaging in an intimacy relationship with an AI, and the last ARC conference that Jordan Peterson hosted, we talked a lot about the crisis of meaning, and I can't think of a more emblematic example than this. Instead of whether it's a church group, whether it is some kind of recreational group, whether it is parents, whether it's an extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, the fact that this poor young adolescent decided to go to an artificial intelligence to feel some kind of connection with is a scathing indictment of where we are as a society. And I heard through the grapevine, but from a very reliable source who knows, that some of the AIs, 80% of their use is from a desire to make a connection that they don't feel in their lives. So I don't think that this is I think that this is a rarity in its ultimate outcome, but I don't think that the risk that leads to this is a rarity at all. I actually think that it is a gross majority of the utility of AI today.
Yeah. I think the movie was called Her, that had Joaquin Phoenix years ago. And
I've
this was
heard
sort
of
of,
it, but I haven't seen it. Yeah, I haven't seen it.
yeah, it's great. You should watch it. But this was sort of imagining where AI would go. And it's a man who, he's a handsome guy. He could find a girlfriend, but he instead ends up in a relationship with the AI chat bot. And it's the same thing. So I think, even before this technology was available, humans realized that this is something that we would be susceptible to, because it's really easy. And AI, you give the inputs, it gives you back what you want. It's like a mirror to exactly what you want. And why wouldn't that be extremely tempting to people who, maybe are otherwise having a hard time finding what they want in human relationships? It's just like, it's instant gratification in a different form.
That's right. And so, that's the unfortunate thing, is that we may think that the AI pushes this content, pushes this this desire into people, but it seems very much as though it's the opposite. It is the crisis in meaning, it's the lack of meaning that people have in their lives that they are then seeking in the AI, right? And so the problem is not inherent to the AI. Do you spend much time with AI these days, Amy?
I don't. I've been trying to, I want to be familiar with it because I recognize it as a tool that will be increasingly used, and I want to be proficient in it. But I've honestly found it frustrating a lot of the times. And when I've tried to use it, rather than using a regular Google search to try to find academic journals, I've found that it will cite things that don't exist, or it will draw conclusions from studies that are not correct and don't exist. And I retweeted this from the Acuity account, is numerous judges have even been sort of caught recently in the UK and Canada and the US writing actual legal judgments using AI, and the quotes are made up or the rulings are made up just to false information. So at this point in time, I'm not a big fan of AI. I use it to try to be proficient, and I hope that one day it might be better.
Yeah, from a professional standpoint, I spend quite a bit of time with it, and I have found that I think Naval Ravikant is correct when he describes it as being a language calculator. So if you're using it to, like, a dictionary thesaurus, right, abbreviating mechanism, then it's particularly helpful. Or if you want a more dispassionate sound, or if you want a more professional sound, it can help with those sorts of things. I mean, it's not anything that like a professional writer wouldn't have used in the past, whether it was through a thesaurus or referencing some kind of like writing guide or whatever. And so it kind of helps with that form. But from a reasoning point of view, from a logic point of view, I agree with you. I have found it wanting. I have explored with it what it's like talking to it about my day. I use Grok, and there's like type of AI form where it's like motivating, or it is a counselor, and it has like these different kind of settings. And I've explored and played around with them to see what that is like. And I have to admit, it is a conscious effort to stay away, because there is something alluring about that. There really is something alluring about that. So I'm blessed, I'm privileged in my life. Everything is going great. I don't have a need for any kind of meaningful relationship with an AI in any way. But even just from exploring it from an academic interest point of view, it has an allure to it that is dangerous, that's insidious.
It does. And you know what I've noticed on that point is I've had Apple Air, is it called Air? No, it's the home speakers. I can't remember what they're called, but I've had them for several years and they have the very basic Siri. You can ask it the weather, definition of a word, very simple Google search terms. But since Grok has been available and since I've gotten used to sort of using that at times, I've I've assumed that my Apple speakers will be able to behave like Grok does, and when it doesn't, I get really frustrated. And I'm like, oh, why doesn't it just have AI? So it's like it's already pulling me in. It's like now I need to get AI speakers because I'm apparent as much as I just railed against AI and how much it frustrates me, and I don't think it's that great. There's also this application in my daily life where, like you said, I'm not, I don't need to form a connection with it, but apparently there is a utility that in my daily life I'm wanting and it's not there already.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I notice absence when I stop using it, or if I'm running from my laptop at a discovery or something else, and I'm like, oh, I don't even have access to it. That's kind of lame. So we all get a small dependency on the tools that we have.
Yeah.
But hopefully that doesn't inexorably lead towards our intimate relationships with AI.
Our certain doom. We're doomed.
Right.
We're doomed.
Let's move on and talk a little bit about the conservative convention that's happening now. This is in Calgary, right?
Yeah, in Calgary. So I wrote about
I do
this
get some
for the
FOMO. I saw
National
your tweet
Post.
about that. I'm getting some FOMO about not being there as well. It looks like a great time. What I've
Yeah,
seen of Pierre's comments already, I really wish I was there and kind of feeling the inspiration, the passion, the energy that comes with these kinds of events.
they are really great. And that's something I have to say about, I've met Mark Carney and I've met Pierre Poilievre in person. Mark Carney was sort of just like, I don't know, a wet cracker. But Pierre
Yeah,
Poilievre,
that's how he
he's
appears.
just,
Like no one's surprised.
yeah.
He's like,
Pierre, when he's in the room, it's he's got a magnetism to him. He draws everyone's attention. He's a great speaker. People really like him. So my only criticism was that I felt, Pierre's having a hard time getting bigger numbers. Everyone who's already a conservative voter or member of the Conservative Party absolutely loves him. I have no doubt, he's going to maintain leadership of the party. But outside of that, he's not getting any traction, and the polls are showing that too. So my sort of only thought, and he's in a really tough situation. Like, what is he supposed to do when Canadians seem so complacent about how bad Carney is? They just don't seem to care, and it's infuriating. And I don't know that there are necessarily any solutions for Poilievre, but I suggested he should have just had the conference in Toronto or Vancouver, get some sort of sustained and hopefully good attention from people outside of his voting base, because really he shouldn't be making any safe moves right now, and doing this convention in Calgary is kind of a safe move.
yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think of two unfortunate but very, very realistic problems. Okay. So the first is the nature of Canadians, the media landscape that we are in. Unfortunately, unlike the much more free spirited, liberty minded neighbors to our south, the average Canadian is far more complacent, right? I mean, like it comes down to a set of almost like DNA, where the loyalists from the American Civil War, from the American War of Independence, move north, and they're very happy to just kind of let things be. And the Americans who were part of the revolution are like, nah, we're staying here and we're not moving. And so it's kind of baked in from a cultural point of view. So that's one component of it. The second is, of course, from the media landscape point of view. If you looked at the approval ratings of legacy media or mainstream media in the US compared to Canada, they are exactly inverse. Where about 65 to 70% of Americans distrust legacy media, 65 to 70% of Canadians still trust the legacy media. And part of it is that the censorship complex from the government has already taken over. There are far fewer options. Facebook, it doesn't allow you to broadcast news. Everyone is still reliant on CBC, CTV, and so on. And those have been explicitly bought out by government. Massive handouts, more and more funding from the liberals. And so the bias that is inherent in them is only amplified because in a completely unsurprising turn of events, incentives matter. If you're not going to antagonize the hand that feeds you. And so it's just a natural thing that these kinds of legacy institutions continue to support and put out the very much left-sided liberal propaganda. So Pierre's in an extremely difficult position. When it comes to the numbers and his potential, the good news is that young people do lean much further to the right, even despite all the left-wing media force. So it's much more a matter of motivating the base to come out and vote. And I often think about it like this, and I would love to get your impression on it. If, let's just say that it was an Aaron O'Toole figure or a Jean Charest figure, if you're only going to motivate 50 or 60% of your base to come out, and your base only represents 40%, 45% of the population, the chances of winning is extremely low. If you are a Pierre and you can motivate 70% or 80% of your 40 to 45% of your base to come out, well, that can make a much bigger difference, especially if your opponent is either splitting the vote with the NDP or that they are so uninspired, the base, to come out and vote for them. And so that's where I think the margins really start to narrow, is that the turnout in Canadian elections is rather abysmal. And if you can drive your base to be sufficiently motivated, maybe that's where the hope really is.
Yeah, and people also forget that Poilievre, despite losing the election, and it was really clear to me that he would have won had Justin Trudeau not prorogued Parliament and allowed for the Liberal Party to put Mark Carney in as leader of the party before they held an election. Regardless, Poilievre still did, he pulled in numbers for his party that were better than the party has ever seen. And he's still doing incredibly well. And you have to look at the fact that the NDP in Canada under Jagmeet Singh lost their party status. All of those votes went to the Liberal Party. So if the NDP hadn't so abysmally failed under Jagmeet Singh, that I think Poilievre would have been prime minister right now.
Agreed. I think, right. And so, the small undercurrents, especially from the CBC, about trying to undermine Pierre's opportunity to stay as leader, with that absolute, I mean, this is a curse-friendly show. We have no problem cursing. The asshole that Chris D'Entremont is, right? Like, when you see these MPs...
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, no problem. This is totally curse-friendly zone. Right? So I think that the left-wing media is really trying to capitalize on this to try and undermine Pierre. But Pierre's success as leader has been spectacular, and the source of his loss has been politics and political mechanics. And I think that that's really what made the difference. Now, of course, the criticism would always be like, well, he should have been able to overcome those differences. But given the successes that he had with the citizenry that he has, with the forces up against him, I don't think that there's anyone in Canada currently who could come close to competing with him in the Conservative government as it is currently. I mean, like, you could make a case that whether it's like a Jordan Peterson figure or a Kevin O'Leary figure, somebody who's like absolutely bombastic and a huge cultural stone, might be able to compete. But from a politician point of view, I mean, like, he's head and shoulders above anyone else.
He is, and I don't think anyone would be able to compete. And I think they know that when they're telling him that he needs to resign, you need fresh leadership. I don't think anybody else has what he has. I know some people say, oh, bring in female leadership. I'm not sure that would make a difference, because you hear some people say, oh, he's too far right, and you say, well, what about him is far right? Tell me. And they have no answer for you. You look at all of the various factors that have made him not win the last election, and they're all outside of his control. And obviously, the captured media is an enormous factor in that. And despite, like you said, all of these factors, he has done so well. So
Yeah.
I think that he should stay on as party leader. And I think that if anybody will get close to defeating the Liberals, it's going to be him. So I hope he goes nowhere.
Yeah, I agree. I strongly support him. I'm happy to revisit that depending on what the lineup of people are that would be putting their hat in the ring. But I don't see anybody on the horizon that merits real serious consideration or support at all. I mean, like he posted the picture there on the right of his family as they sit in economy class on their way to Calgary, and then someone else posted the picture to the left with him just sitting there kind of raw dogging the flight. And I thought that this was an amazing image. Somebody who is as loved, as popular as he is there. He is just so unassuming. I've met him a couple of times. I think that he's totally magnetic. I think that he's brilliantly intelligent. I thought his interviews with Jordan Peterson were just masterclass, extremely well spoken, extremely well read. So by pedigree, by ideology, by principle, by his experience and his person, I'm a very, very strong Pierre supporter.
Yeah, I totally agree. And he actually I think we have this mutual friend who is a physician in Quebec, who's a pediatric endocrinologist, who's a friend of his, who shared contact info. So Pierre could call me after I got fired from my job for, standing up for biological reality, women's sex-based rights. And he just called me, and he's just really disarming, like you said, really intelligent, very charming. And I think after I had that conversation, I'm like, this is a guy who gets it. And obviously when you're a politician, you're playing politics, but that really sort of sealed it for me. I'm like, this.
I really love that story.
I would love to.
I really love that story.
Yeah,
it makes him
it was great.
So human, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like who else would do that? What leader of the official opposition would just reach out to some random citizen because of what happened to them for standing up for free speech, and take the time out of their day to do that? It was very meaningful.
So we'll keep our eye on the Conservative convention and see what else materializes there. But after talking about our beloved celebrity leader of the opposition, let's move on finally to Sydney Sweeney, and let's talk about another beloved celebrity. We talked about her a little bit already. Like, to me, it seems like she just exploded on the scene. Like, okay, she was the hot girl from Euphoria, and that was kind of it. But man, has she become a firestorm on the internet? Unbelievable traction, and quite like an inspiring persona. Her perspective on what it means to be a celebrity and to weigh in or opt not to weigh in on politics. I just could not be more enamored. And I'm not going to talk about the physicality and her physical allure, because she's obviously gorgeous. She's absolutely breathtaking. But man, what an inspiring celebrity for people to look up to.
Yeah, she's so young, and so she has so much presence, and she dealt with, so going back, she sort of first burst into the public eye after this SNL appearance, and a lot of people wrote about it, myself included, saying this like signaled the end of wokeness in a way, because she just showed up on SNL. She's gorgeous. She flaunted her physical beauty. She flaunted her breasts, made jokes about it, no apologies. And she's like this beautiful white woman. And it was like, I thought we weren't allowed to do this for the last 5 years. It was like, you're not allowed to be white. You're not allowed to be pretty. You're not allowed to flaunt like quote unquote Eurocentric beauty standards, but she did. So it was like this cultural moment. And then the people who pointed that out, the left just fucking lost it on us. And then she sort of stayed out of any sort of commentary, but remained very well known, getting a lot of acting gigs, and then fast forward to her being in the American Eagle Good Jeans ad.
And the fire, the total meltdown from the left about this ad was, absolute fuel to the right. It was a rather innocuous ad, you know, like her talking about her good genes at the most extreme way to interpret it is talking about the endowment of her breasts, right? Like they're natural, right? And that was the most extreme way that I could take it, as if she was talking about her whiteness, like her blonde hair, or like I didn't that this was
Yeah.
the sense of beauty, that it couldn't come from a darker skinned or a minority ethnic background. None of that was implied at all. I couldn't believe what I was seeing that was going on.
It was wild. And then there were, cue the dozens, if not hundreds, of TikTokers with their ridiculous haircuts and purple and blue dyed hair and their septum rings, crying about white supremacy, like suggesting that she's the most evil woman on earth. It was completely unhinged. And then
Yeah.
American Eagle had a moment like the inverse of was it Bud Light, when they had the transgender Dylan Mulvaney try to sell beer for them, and then their stock tanked. But for American Eagle,
Just
they
skyrocketed. Like, I don't
soared.
remember, it was like 30% in 24 hours. I remember I was on shift and I was talking to my friends, and there's one friend of mine who's like quite involved in the stock market, and I was like, hey man, you want to make a quick buck? You gotta put some money in American Eagle while the pressure's going, right? Like,
Yeah.
an incredible moment culturally. And she continued. She never had like she never acquiesced. She never capitulated to the pressures from the left, which in and of itself is admirable. And then
Yeah.
further than that, all the efforts from left-wing media, Hollywood, magazines, you can feel that the pressure from them has become so weak that there was nothing really to capitulate to. There was no acting gigs that she was canceled from. The subsequent box office blockbusters continue to go. Now there's an exorbitant success of the Housemaid. Like, it's just a cultural moment that it testifies to the lack of power, the lack of strength from the left, even in the entertainment industry, which is such a strong prognostic indicator for the fact that society is improving, we're healing.
She's doing great, and she's not, her most recent, after she had this really uncomfortable GQ interview where this interviewer tried to pressure her into admitting that the American Eagle ad was white supremacy in disguise. It was so ridiculous, and she just sort of sat there and smiled coyly and didn't answer, which I absolutely loved it. It was great. And since then, she's repeatedly been asked about her politics, and recently just said, you know what, I'm an artist. I'm not talking about my politics. I don't think it's my place. I just want you to enjoy my art. And I really love that. I wish that all celebrities would do that. And I also, it made me reflect on, I have to remind myself of that because recently, like Nicki Minaj, she went on this Turning Point USA Amfest or whatever. And
I was just about to ask you. Because it's one thing when we criticize whether it's Beyonce or Rihanna or whoever, and they come out there with their virtue signaling nonsense, and we're like, oh, there's no place for that. But we have to be just as equally willing to say the same thing. Don't get me wrong, I very much appreciate Nicki Minaj having the courage to come out, because in general it is the left that has the safety and the willingness to step forward and make these kinds of political statements. So I appreciate her courage in coming out to say that. But to be honest with you, as much as I love the fact that she has caused another meltdown on the left, I don't care about Nicki Minaj at all. I don't care what her opinions are. I don't care what her photo ops are. So it's like entirely irrelevant to me. But Sydney Sweeney's comment was exactly right. That's what you want to hear. I'm an artist.
Yeah.
I don't have political messaging. I'm in entertainment for everyone.
Exactly. It's, and I did the same at first. I was like, I was sort of happy about Nicki Minaj. And I thought, if I want to maintain my stance, I try to be a very principled person, I shouldn't celebrate this at all. So I tried to take a step back from that. And I have other artists, like one of my favorite artists is Doja Cat. And I'm like, please never announce your politics. I really don't want to know either way. Just do your art. That's all I want. Just stay neutral.
I have to admit, Amy, it's like one of the other major benefits of having you here, because I do not know who or what that is. I don't know what a Doja Cat is. I basically, I have this running joke with most of my friends that I do not listen to music, generally speaking, ever, and especially not any music that has lyrics. Well, almost never. I don't know what's played on the radio these days. I see all these things like, I know that there's a person out there who seems to be quite popular, whose name is Dua Lipa. I thought that was Doja Cat. I thought that they were the same kind of entity. So I'm really glad that you're here to kind of weigh in and kind of reflect on what's happening in the cultural medium, because I'm often totally not with it.
One's she's an Eastern European woman, pop artist, and the other is a South African, half Black, half Jewish rapper.
Right. And so, I mean, like, it's totally ridiculous that I would confuse the two. It's just, I don't know what either of them look like or sound like. It's just the name, prominent D sound at the beginning. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's all the same. Yeah, it's all the same.
Yeah, but I mean, they're both great. So that's fine. I'll be the pop culture one. And I don't want to be embarrassed anymore. I'm like, I don't care. I like pop culture. I think it's fascinating. I know that it can be lowbrow, but whatever, I like it. I also like highbrow things and lowbrow things, including pop culture and including really bad reality TV, which I refer to as anthropological studies. So that's how I justify it.
I will totally admit that this is a Love Island household. I watch it religiously. And now Canada Shore is out on Amazon Prime, and 3 episodes in, totally addicted. Absolutely love that. Wow. Cannot wait for next week's episode. So we all get our guilty pleasures, and there's a highbrow, lowbrow. There's something out there for everyone, and you can appreciate different cultural moments and experiences completely uniquely. But that being said, Sydney Sweeney, full support. Love that. Keep going. I want to see more of that from a political point of view. The meltdowns on the left, the fact that it is an indictment of left-wing entertainment, that slowly things are returning back to normal. I'm just totally for it.
Yes. Sydney Sweeney, full support, no pun intended.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this week's episode. We will be back with Amy again next week, and I'm going to be putting out an episode on medical malpractice cases, specifically on the legal concepts of what we call a thin skull rule and the crumbling skull rule, which is when patients who are injured already have comorbidities, and how case law and legal theory addresses those comorbidities. So thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
My friends, let us consider that acuity is the refined clarity of thought and perception which enables one to discern subtle truths.